sometimes as a parent, maybe you feel like it's too late. My kid's 16, 17, about to be 18. It's too late to have spiritual moments, spiritual conversations. But the truth is, they don't stop needing spiritual moments when they leave the house. I mean, I need spiritual moments. We all need these moments. So I had a student share once that, they said that one of their parents wasn't as involved in the spiritual journey just because of busyness and work and different things early on, but later on tried to make an effort. And they were so appreciative that even though they didn't see that when they were younger, that now at this point they started making that effort. And so I guess really the phrase is, it's not too late.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Between Sundays. We are so excited that you have joined us for this episode, another amazing, mind-blowing episode of Between Sundays.
Fantabulous.
Right, fantabulous.
Fantabulous.
Okay, walk me through the process of choosing that word.
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, it was a great one. It's fantabulous. But this is going to be a fantastic and a fantabulous episode. Because we have some amazing people in the room. When we're releasing this, we're right in the middle of our family month, which is an exciting time. And we recently released an episode with our children's pastor, which was amazing, children's pastors, which was amazing. And now we have the privilege to have some other amazing leaders in the room. So why don't you introduce them?
Yeah, so grateful for Bill and Amber Mathis. They are our youth pastors, been serving in that role for 5 years. They serve on our senior leadership team. And they do a fantastic job. I can't thank them enough for their ministry, their example, their guidance, and their heart for our young people. I know I have something invested in this. I have a young person under their ministry and their influence. And I couldn't be more grateful to have a youth pastor and wife that care deeply about our kids and care deeply about what youth ministry really looks like. And so, Bill and Amber, welcome. Glad you're here on Between Sundays.
Yeah, we're so excited to be here. Honored. Long-time listeners. First time call-ins. So.
It's the first time anyone's ever said that, which is great. But we appreciate your time, and thanks for being long-time listeners. And we are excited to have you guys doing this today. This conversation could go so many different directions, right? On the subject, we have our youth pastors, so we could go all kinds of different directions.
So many different ways.
We could talk about the Dallas Cowboys today.
Let's not.
But we're not going to, even though we could, right, Bill?
It's not helpful.
It's not helpful. But since we wanted this to be helpful, and we don't want to divide our congregation immediately, let's talk about something that really matters.
Yeah.
That matters to us, matters to them. And that's the world that we're in and the world that our young people are in right now. And we just want to talk about some of the challenges that they're facing. And as we always say to everyone who's listening, we want this to be helpful. We want it to be a resource and a tool that they can use. And so, Pastor, let's just jump into this.
Yeah, I think the subject matter is so deeply personal to me, but more importantly, just the realities of our world. And I wouldn't want to be a youth pastor right now. The challenges that they face, the things that they have to contend with is just, again, way beyond what I had to as a youth pastor. And so for them to step into that arena and with a heart and anointing and a giftedness that they have to shepherd our young people is very special. And so we do pray for you. We do pray that God continues to bless you and to give you the wisdom and grace to lead a generation, because the stakes have never been higher. There is truly more at stake as far as what is coming after our young people, the intentionality of the world, the current of our society, the culture we're raising our children, our young people in is, again, not Christian friendly. We are living in a post-Christian generation. And those all try to influence with media, social media, all the things. Again, we can go on and on and on, how they have an intention of affecting our kids. And we have to contend with that from a righteous perspective. I remember reading a book a long time ago. I recommend it to a lot of parents. It's called Already Gone. It's talking about when people leave church, like, do people graduate from high school, then graduate from their faith? That's the mindset. That's the thing that most people think. But the reality is that idea or that seed is planted a long time before high school graduation. It's actually started in junior high when, again, they start entertaining thoughts about God and church and faith and what do they believe and who they are and what their future holds. And all of that really is a truth. It's staggering. It's scary at some point that, man, we're dealing in a very toxic society, and can we prevail against this? Here's a stat that's true too. Only 2 out of 8 children or 2 out of 8 teenagers raised in church, who come faithfully to church, who are part of the church, who are recognized in the church, 2 out of 8 children, actually, when they come to their 22nd birthday, remain in church. Like the majority of them walk away from faith and begin to turn their back on the church or God and whatever religion, faith they have. This is not Pentecostal faith. This is, again, denominational wide. It's just the reality. And so I want to say a great big thank you again, and just celebrate your leadership, what God has called you guys to do, and what you're facing. And so just kind of set the table, Bill and Amber, just when we talk about youth ministry, when we talk about the challenges, again, we'll get into specific challenges, but just set the table, what youth ministry looks like.
Yeah, I think, obviously we recognize that no matter what age you're at, that you have a part to play in the kingdom, but just understanding that this age is so crucial for development, for obviously mental capacity growth, but also spiritual growth, and that this is in a lot of ways the launching pad for the remainder of your life is youth ministry into the college age. And so we just recognize the weight of that, and again, what we like to say is we recognize we're also not their parents, and so we can get into just the importance of parents and the role that they play. We shared an example some time ago that parents have roughly about 3,000 hours in a year, as opposed to student ministry, which has 50 hours. And we recognize for us the importance of those 50 hours. We pray, we fast, we think and dream and plan and strategize around those 50 hours. But we recognize that what we're doing is, in so many ways, it's a partnership with parents. And so for us, again, as a married couple celebrating 5 years this last March, and I'm so grateful, Amber. We made it this far. So, but and many more years to go. But at this point, we don't have kids, and pray obviously God blesses us with kids one day. And but so we come out with this with which try to with a ton of humility and a ton of compassion, but recognizing that students are just growing up in a different world. The digital things that they're facing, the challenges. It's just so different than even for us, as we've talked 10 years ago, just the weight of that. There's an author who said it like this with in regards to just the toll of digital landscape that they're in, is that it's like we took our kids and said we're gonna move them to Mars, and parents are saying, okay, well, you're moving them to Mars. Do we know can you even sustain life on Mars? And they're saying, well, we don't really know. We haven't done a lot of research. And they're saying, okay, well, is there even a safe passageway to Mars? And they're like, well, no, we don't really know. We have no way of being sure of that. And they're saying, well, how do you even know if this is good for our kids? Well, we don't know. We're just going to take them to Mars. And the point he was making was that this is kind of what we've done with social media and with the connection of technology, is that we've given kids access to these things that we don't fully understand the development and the effect that it has on their mental health, on their emotional health, their spiritual health. Yeah. And so that's the landscape that we're in. And I know that the tendency can be doom and gloom, but we recognize that God didn't place us as youth pastors, as you as parents, students, didn't place us in this time on accident. If God placed us here, it means that He knew that we could do it.
Amen.
I heard somebody say that if He wanted Paul and Peter to be in this time, He would have chosen them, but He chose us. And so that's humbling. There's a weight and a burden to that, but I'm also filled with confidence, knowing, man, I know that if God has placed us here, there's a reason for it.
Yeah. I would say to every mom and dad listening, myself included, again, this is a podcast to strength in your hand and to love on you, right? This is not here to share what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right. We recognize this is a challenge, and parents, you have a tough road to hoe, and we know that the enemy wants us to get it wrong and feel like failures. Like most moms and dads, I know that if you pull back the curtain a little bit, they would say, you know what, man, I've blown it. I wish I would have done some things differently. And so to all of you, we want to extend grace to you. We want you to know we appreciate the fight you're in. We honor the position you hold. We want to lift your hands. We want you to know we're here to be your family's best friends. And so that's the intention, the heart of us coming together around this subject of what it means to lead teenagers in this day and age. Let's dive right into it and get really practical. So I think one of the big issues that we face is really technology. You touched on it a little bit, but honestly, that is the issue. Like every kid wants the latest phone. Every kid is addicted to their phone. Go to a restaurant, go anywhere, and there's a group of kids together. They're not talking to one another. They're on their phones and they're just doing whatever, right? Like they play games in the room together on their phone, not talking, not interacting with one another. It's crazy, right? But this is also a device that has destroyed people. There's been things in the news of late where sextortion has been a big part of people battling shame, guilt, even suicide. And this is all due to the apps and entertainment and things regarding the phone. I'd like for you to just dive into that subject matter and just kind of give us some help.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a point of maybe clarity for us, or just a place that we like to start from is, I recognize obviously teenagers seem to be more susceptible to the negative side of this digital landscape that we're in. But I also recognize this is a battle that no matter what age you are, that we all face.
That's right.
So an addiction to TikTok is no different than an addiction to Facebook. That you're still battling the time, the energy, and what's taking you. So one way that I like to frame it, a question that I like to ask myself personally, is do I have devices, or do my devices have me? And meaning that, we recognize that these are tools, that phones and social media apps, these are tools. They can be used for great things, for connection, for collaboration in work, for evangelism. You're thinking about social media, and there's so many different benefits that you don't want to always tout it as innately evil. But there is a tendency for us to make the tool the thing that is the main thing. And so for me personally, before I ever say, well, you as a parent, you as a teenager, you as a student, you need to make sure you get your digital habits in order, I have to look at myself and say, okay, is this something that I've conquered in my own life personally? And so, a couple of things for me that I do, and again, this might be a help for someone if you feel like, as a parent, maybe you're like, well, I want to have conversations. And again, Pastor, you framed this so well that this isn't about shame. It's not about condemning. This is how do we have healthy digital habits? How do we come from a place of healthy relationship with technology? And so as a parent, maybe you say, if I'm honest and I look back at my habits, maybe they're not where I would like for them to be. And so starting there and then working together to form good habits. So a couple of things that I do personally, and again, this is not from a place of strength. These are disciplines from a place of weakness, of I need these things, is for my phone right now, it's set to black and white. So if you go through my phone, there's no color in it because it makes it less appealing. It keeps me from being on it and diving into it for too long, and it's just a good practice for me that keeps me from spending all my time on my phone. Another thing I do is I'll leave my phone when we go to sleep at night. I charge my phone in the other room, and now sometimes if my alarm goes off on my phone and I don't wake up immediately, that can be a little bit of a tension.
Every day.
Every day. But I try to wake up, when I hear the alarm. But what this does is if I leave my phone in the other room, I'm not tempted to scroll at night. And again, sometimes it's not even, and I know we'll talk about, the dangers of pornography and the different avenues that you can take on a phone, but sometimes it's just scrolling on Instagram till 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
I have to think as a leader, as a husband, as a follower of Jesus, is that the best use of my time personally to lose sleep, to be inundated with content? Is that helping me be the best that I can be? And so I go through all of those things. Another habit that I try try to implement is if Amber and I are, on a date or if we're going for a walk, then I try to just leave my technology in the house because I don't want to be distracted. And all of this comes down to this idea that if my devices have me, I'm going to have a really hard time hearing God's voice. I'm going to have a really hard time making room for God because these screens are addicting. There's studies that show that for kids that have heavy access to screens, whether it's phones, video games, it in your brain connects you so strong to this device that it makes everything else seem boring and uninteresting. And so we recognize as people who understand spiritual disciplines and want to develop that in kids that this can be such a battle that you're having to face. And so I start there because for me, I recognize that one, I want to be able to say, hey, this is not just do this. I don't want to just tell you what to do. I want to tell you what I'm doing. And so that's the first place. But the other place is we just recognize that for so much of human history, parents have grown up being the authority, the chief person of wisdom in a topic. So they would teach their kids to hunt, teach their kids to sew, teach their kids to do these things that they knew how to do. But we're growing up in a time where kids have devices and have these things that they're the chief expert on. And so now in a lot of ways, maybe parents, maybe you feel like I don't know what to do with these things because I didn't grow up with this. My Gen Z, Gen Alpha child is a digital native. And so now they're growing up in a world where they have an understanding of something a device that I just don't have full access to, and so or full understanding of. So, a big encouragement for us is parents, if your kid has a device, learn the device. There's so many great resources. Protect Young Eyes is a great website. Access.org is another great website. But just if you want to learn how do these devices work, I think it's important for parents, if they're going to give devices, give phones, give things to kids, that they know the inner workings of that device. You don't have to be an expert. Find experts. We do that a lot. We try to say the best thing you could do is refer. So if you don't know, if you're trying to figure something out, I think the best thing you can do is do your research or find people that have an understanding of this. Not because it makes you less of a parent. Right. It actually is a strength to say, no, I need help, and I want my kids to have healthy habits. I don't want devices to have them. And so just recognizing that's a tension, not just for students, but for all of us.
Yeah, I want to address this a little deeper because I think this is really the conversation. Like, when do you give a kid a phone? When is that permissible? When do they own their own technology? Like, what do you give them access to? And, I know as the peer pressure of, it seems like kids can do whatever they want on the phone. And that appears to be like the norm. I think a caring parent, whether you're in church or not, you care. You're going to put some parameters around the phone. You've mentioned some of it. For us, it's like, okay, we need to know your passcode. We don't want, again, anybody can go into my phone and your phone because we all share the same passcode. You don't take your phone in your room. You don't just download any app. You don't erase any app. You don't have that access to do any of that. We want to make sure we're managing with you. Now, because some things is not like don't you love me or don't you trust me? Well, some things it's not a matter of trust. Some things it's a matter of time and experience. Okay, so a kid, he's growing up and said, "Man, I didn't do anything wrong." Well, you can get involved with something that it's beyond your emotional maturity to handle. You don't have the time, and you don't have the experience to know where that leads. This is where you have to be okay with your kids not being happy with you, right? And maybe being angry with you. I've walked away with, again, angry. My kids not happy with me because I won't let them download an app. My friends are wanting me to download this app so we can play this game. Well, I don't know anything about that app. Let me do a little research. Let me kind of verify this, whether it's good. And honestly, there's sometimes I come back and say, yeah, let's download. Because here's the goal. I'm trying to say yes as much as I can because I know I have to say no a lot. Okay? Like there's a lot I say no to. So I'm trying to look at every aspect to say yes, because I know I'm throwing out a lot of no's. And so when it comes to, again, I want to make sure it's age appropriate. I want to make sure it's content appropriate, right? But there are times I said, no, this is not going to work. This is 18 plus. This is mature. This is not going to work for you. And I don't consider myself tech savvy, but you've given us some really handrails as far as here's a website to go check out. Here's a website to bounce a game off, a video game, an app off. Just go check this out and just see where it rates. Let's look at the content of that. These are real life issues, and moms and dads, it's not going away. It's not going to go away, and it's something that we got to continue to keep a pulse on. I just think something that this topic is very important.
Yeah, I think too. You said something earlier. You guys, and I appreciate the humility of what you're saying. You don't have kids right now, so your approach to this, isn't coming from, well, we know what it's like to be a parent. I think honestly, that can be refreshing too, because what's happening is, you said it, that role sometimes gets reversed to where the kids know more about this than the parents. The kids are more tech savvy than the parents. I don't think we're not condoning that. I think if you're giving your kids a device, you should know what you're giving them before you put it in their hands. So, but I think that you use the word partnership, which is something I love that word, because this is you guys supporting, and you hear the passion. You hear how much study that's gone into this and research, and we know that this really matters. So a question I guess I would have is, like, in your experience over these last, almost 5 years in youth ministry, and you guys were in youth ministry before that, serving on a team and involved in all that. So what have you seen over these last 5 years that you would say, this is what we need to be talking about right now? Like, what are some things that you would say, like, this is why today we are having this conversation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Two things really that come to mind. One, I think just thinking of this generation, thinking of, even as a teenager, kind of what was put to the forefront of this is what we value. Student ministry was let's make it as cool as possible, as incredible as possible, and that was because that's what that generation was wanting. They were looking for the coolest. They were looking for the latest, the cutting edge. But this generation, Gen Z, moving now into Gen Alpha, there's such a push for authenticity, which is refreshing for me, growing up. And again, for maybe you as a listener, you're newer to our church, you might not know, but Billy and Lauren Haley were the previous youth pastors. And when I tell you the cool youth pastors, they were the cool youth pastors.
150 years ago, you could be.
And Noah got off the ark. I mean, that's where
No, that was Pastor Dan's tenure.
Yeah. Oh goodness. But they were the cool youth pastors, and so and not just cool, but obviously incredible. I wouldn't be sitting in this room right now if it wasn't for Billy and Lauren Haley. But what I recognized, and I had to wrestle this in myself, was one, I can't do it the way that they did it because I'm not them, and it was kind of a breath of fresh air because I feel like I'm not the cool youth pastor. I wasn't the cool guy in school, and I feel like I've never really been like the cool, and I'm going to use a word that's not cool, hip. Not the hip guy. Skibbity. There we go. No, bring it back.
Skibbity toilet.
Skibbity toilet. But
we just lost 90% of our listeners are gone. Yeah.
Hey, no cap. Sorry about that. Anyways, but I think for me it was helpful to know, man, that what this generation wants, what they really need is just people who are real, who can be authentic about this. And so, Craig Rochelle has this quote that you impress through your strengths, but you connect in your weaknesses.
Good.
So if I can be honest with a student that, hey, like the digital issues that you're facing, the seeing someone on social media and feeling jealous or feeling less than, or feeling like, man, I spend too much time on my phone, because the reality is they see that too. Sometimes we think that I have a friend who's a children's pastor, but I think this applies to youth ministry, is that we think that kids aren't people. He said the key to kids ministry, student ministry is realizing kids are people. So students recognize some of these issues that, hey, I'm spending too much time on my phone. My mental health is suffering. There's such an awareness of that. But if I can bring just some authenticity to say, hey, like an appropriate, a wise amount of saying, hey, I get that because I battle that too. I've got to put things in place. I think then you can connect in a way that says, all right, I'm not the only one that's struggling with this. I'm not the only one that's dealing with this. And now let's walk through this together. Let's find a way forward together. I recognize the importance in discipleship and leading of being, they say one step ahead or one page ahead. But sometimes just say, hey, you're not the only one that's struggling. You're not the only one that's battling this. And I think just an awareness of that is so helpful.
Yeah, again, to be very practical, like, again, research after research says the phone and the amount of time we allow our kids to stay on the phone is not good for their mental health. I mean, they are struggling, comparing themselves, watching people's lives. It's not even really their real life, but it's the life they project, right? And comparing themselves, again, is doing damage to them. And so I don't know anybody that spends 45 minutes going through social media that's happy, or feels better about themselves, right? There's good content. I don't want to say it's all evil. There is some really great content, but where your tendency to drift, your tendency is going to be things that entertain you, and then it gets you dragging down this hole that you're now comparing yourself in your life, which is very damaging. That's why there's a lot of research out there now. But I do feel like giving moms and dads practical tools, like give you an example, like what is the appropriate age for kids? In my opinion, this is my opinion. Again, I'm not saying if any parent does it is wrong, but in my opinion, again, enter into high school. So for me personally, I mean, Thatcher entering freshman year of high school, he got a phone for going into high school. He's had a watch that we kind of kept track on him and could communicate and manage that a little bit better. Social media, he does not have social media. He would love social media. He would love to be a part of that, be in the in crowd. I'm not interested in him having the latest app. I really am trying to protect him, but I also realize I can't wait till he's 21 and say, okay, now you can do whatever you want. I have to train him. So, apps for me are social media about 16. Again, I think that's a kind of where the number's landing. I'd love to know your thoughts on some of that as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying is it's so amazing because it's backed by research. It's backed. That's scientific evidence for that. There's a book that I'm working through right now. I think Pastor Billy, you're reading it as well, called The Anxious Generation, and the whole premise of the book is the connection of anxiety, mental health disorders, suicide thoughts, attempts to social media and the rise of smartphones. And so there's a very apparent rise from the time of about 2011 until now in mental health, suicidal issues, which coincides with the availability of smartphones in the hands of teenagers. And this data is specifically around 10 to 14, 15-year-olds. So really following Gen Z, but the connection to smartphone availability and the social media boom of that time. And so there is clear evidence that for adolescents who are going through such a crucial formative time, that social media is more harmful than it is good. Now they need social interaction. They need peer-to-peer engagement. They need those times. But the issues come when it's only through social media, which you alluded to is not always a real form. So one of the things that I would suggest is, as far as with social media, I think 16 is a great age. I know a lot of parents that wait until 18, and I think all of that is great. I don't know if I would do younger than that personally. One of the things in this book that they describe is that from the time a kid is 9 until they're 15, the experiences, the impressions, the things that they face, learn, that is some of the most formative because their minds are the most malleable. So it's in those times that what they're seeing, and there's a phrase I heard recently that's so powerful in this, that what informs you forms you. And so being mindful of what you're allowing your students to be informed by is going to form them. So I think having those conversations is so crucial too. Not just saying this is what we're doing, But even just bringing conversation to around what's the why behind this? Because again, Pastor, you alluded to this. At some point, kids grow into adults, and they need to learn. Okay, how can I make decisions, place guardrails, place habits in my life for myself when I'm out of the house, when I no longer have parents? And so a huge part of this is not just telling you what to do, but it's having conversations and saying, hey, like, this is why we're doing this. I know other kids your age, they might not be having these conversations, but we are huge proponents of inviting parents to have conversations with students. I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's tough. Access.org is a great, again, resource for that, for parental guides, questions, just great places to have those topics to
What's
discuss.
that website again?
Access.org, AXIS.org. But it's a great starting place because it gives you just some ways to have conversations. And then when you're having conversations with students, it's not just, hey, don't do this. And I recognize there's times of that. There's times, again, where you have to have those hard no's. But to be able to have conversations allows the student to just have some insight into, okay, well, what's the reason why? Yeah. And it allows them to then begin to, as they grow and become adults, to thoughtfully create habits and practices for themselves.
So one of the issues here, and Bill, I'll go to you next, the issue is not just the time, the content, right? Like we say, content is king, okay? So I want to really address something about pornography, okay? Because I think most kids, again, I've been privileged to preach several camps, and when I get the moment where a kid comes to me and says, hey, will you pray for me? I'm telling you 9 out of 10 times what they're praying for is that they're addicted to pornography. They're struggling with pornography. As a pastor, when I have people come in here, and it's just not young men, it's young ladies too, that, hey, I need prayer. Let's address this issue. I could preach about pornography every Sunday, and I would be hitting a lot of people in our church that are struggling with that. It's so pervasive, so easy, so, it's just so accessible. And so I'd love to have your take on just kind of how do we navigate that?
Yeah, that is, I think, is such a huge issue because I think it's easy to assume that it's not going to happen to your kid.
Right.
That it's something that only happens to other kids, or it's something that only happens to teenage guys, or it's something that only happens to teenagers. We live in a world where we have instant access to any type of pornography that you could ever imagine. And it's different than it was 30 years ago when the access was in a store or in a place you wouldn't go to. But now it's at the tip of your fingers. And so I think recognizing that, and two, also recognizing that a lot of the times pornography is a symptom of a deeper issue. So we often will treat pornography as the main thing. But I know for some people, pornography is their way to feel like they're in control, or they feel like there is a lack of, there's a deficiency of some type of love, of caring. They feel like this is the way that they can fill that. Now, we can also get very practical. We can get very practical about how you dive into combating that, about placing guardrails. And there's, again, parental controls, accountability. Covenant Eyes is a great resource for this. But again, I think recognizing that it is so accessible, and oftentimes when I've talked with students who struggle with this, it's not something they want to battle. It's not something they want. There's not there is the in the moment, physical gratification of consuming that, but afterwards it's guilt. And so it's saying, okay, let's have honest conversations about, what can we do? What can we put in place to help with this? And so one of the big things is access. And I think being aware that access isn't just on a phone. Anything that has a browser has access to pornography, has access to things that are evil, ill-willed.
Your game console,
your iPads, your laptops. There's a story of this is not someone at our church, but there's a story of a mom who had submitted a question to a youth pastor and said, hey, I don't know what's going on. My child is spending, 5-6 hours a day on the Bible app, the YouVersion Bible app. And they were like, well, that's interesting. 5 to 6 hours a day. I mean, at first you're like, that's great. They're on the Bible app. This is amazing. They're diving into the Word of God. When they start to dig in, they realize that they were friends with their girlfriend on this app. This young man was, and what he was doing 5 hours a day was sending through comments on a verse, was sending pictures, nude pictures back and forth between their girlfriend and him on the Bible app. So the
oh my word.
So the issue is not just one type of way, but again, there's typically a deeper thing going on. And so to have those conversations, again, those are not comfortable conversations. I think that's why often our role, our place in what we do, I think is helpful, because sometimes it is easier for a student to come to a youth pastor and to have that conversation. Yeah. But a lot of the times I've encouraged our students when they come to us when they've shared these struggles, to say, hey, have you had a conversation with your parent? And the reason why, and I know this is uncomfortable, but the reason why is I'm not in the home with them. And I'm going to have a hard time in the house bringing accountability. But as a parent, we can say, hey, we're all at night, we're all going to bring our devices into the living room, or we're going to put them. I know there's parents that they take devices up into their room at night. Say we're just going to take devices up into our room, and that's going to be our accountability. Because at the end of the day, students don't want to deal with it because there's such a guilt and a shame associated. We recognize that pornography is not the picture. It's not the way that God intended for us to experience sex and sexual desire. And so with that, why would we not have conversations and be open? Because it's uncomfortable, but it's worth it. It's worth it. I just know that the students that I've had the privilege to walk through this with and help them and bring hope, that they are so grateful that they don't have to live in that secrecy and that shame anymore.
There's so much here, and honestly, this is an entire episode in and of itself. I think for parents, there has to be a reprogramming, because we're in a totally different time where, the way our parents accessed, or, the way that previous generation, the access that they had, it was so much more difficult to get it, right? And so now it's almost like, okay, you have to realize, you guys are talking about it's on game consoles, it's on their Nintendo Switch, and honestly,
on the Bible app.
Like, honestly, that can strike a very ungodly thing, which is fear. We don't want to have fear about this. Right. It should absolutely spark a challenge in our spirit to make sure that we're setting strong guardrails. And I feel like a broken record when I say this, and I hope every parent that's listening, what it ought to make you do is to dig into whatever your kids have access to make sure that they're safe. We would never, I would never, you would never, no parent would ever hand their child a firearm, a loaded weapon, and say, figure this out for yourself, because they understand the risk of a major, major tragedy that could happen. And I have never understood why we hand them devices that may not end their life, but it can absolutely alter their life forever. We had a podcast recently with my father-in-law who told a story about the first time that he saw pornography at the age of 8 years old, and how now he could still, if he allowed his mind, he can still recall images that he saw at 8. And these devices and all of this is a real challenge. It's a real challenge. I think another thing that I've noticed too, and you guys can speak into this as you're in the trenches of this, is there's really, like, not in the church, hopefully, because obviously we're talking about it, but as the world and as the culture becomes just more okay with pornography, it's almost become like this indifference toward it. It's just what we have. It's just where we're at. I remember being in a conversation one time with a guy, and it was three guys, me, another guy from church, and a person who had no church background whatsoever. And we were having a conversation, and this topic of purity and pornography came up, and we were just talking about, why this matters, why we should be protecting our kids. And we said, because, we talked about, we don't want to see people addicted to pornography. And I'll never forget what this guy who had no church background, he interrupted us. He said, "What is an addiction to pornography?" And I thought he was kidding. And he was genuinely asking, like he had never put those two words together, because it was so normalized in his world that an addiction is a bad thing. And pornography was not a bad thing. It was just part of that's just what we do. And so that's the world that we're raising our kids in. That's the world that you guys are youth pastoring in. And it is a challenge. I think too, we've talked about, this is no respecter of gender, right? Both guys and girls are fighting this battle of pornography. But I read something recently about, how this has, I think it's in this same book that you referenced earlier about the anxious generation, but the effect on the female, it's different, right? What the social media, what they do. And so Amber, I was going to ask you, like from a female perspective, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be around the topic of pornography, but just around social media and apps and really probably more along the lines of social media. Like what are some of the challenges that you see young women, young ladies facing in that area?
I think overarching, like what you're saying, would probably be the word comparison.
Yeah.
That probably applies to guys too, I would assume. But I know I can only speak for myself or for students that I've talked with, that I feel like is the trap that we usually fall into. You find yourself scrolling for 45 minutes and then you start to think, oh, well, I don't look like that, or I don't have that, or why can't I fill in the blank? So I think there's obviously opportunity for girls to fall into the trap of pornography as well there, but I think that the word that stands out to me is comparison. And we all know that comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great thought there. And again, I think there's probably deeper ramifications than we even know that it's taking place in the lives and hearts and souls of young people. I think this is the moment for us to strengthen your hand. And I say this, you need, if you're listening, your family, your young people need a youth pastor. You need a youth pastor that your kids can love and trust and go and say things to them that they would not say to you.
Right.
Like, honestly, Billy, you know things about my kids that I don't know. And honestly, I don't want to know, okay? But because of your wisdom, maturity, spiritual direction, you found a way to navigate those treacherous landmines with them in a way. Obviously, if it was something that I needed to know, you would certainly make me aware of that. I'm not talking about covering or hiding anything from parents that they need to know, but I'm talking about having a bridge built with your young people that they can come and knowing you're going to help them navigate something that they feel very uncomfortable speaking with their parents. And so, again, if you're listening to this and you don't bring your kids to youth events, you don't make it a priority to build a relationship with your youth pastor and his wife, you are really hindering your kids' spiritual growth. I think they need leaders like that are not ashamed of their sin, that are more amazed at the grace of God, right? And can see the future, see the best in your kids, even when they're not at their best. So again, thank you for doing that. I want to dig into something else in this matter because, you've mentioned this. You got 50 hours. Family's got 3,000 hours, right? Like that's a huge gap there, okay? And there's so many moms and dads that want you to take your 50 hours and counteract everything or, whatever. Hopefully it's helping those 3,000 hours. But again, what is it that makes moms and dads influence grow in the hearts of young people? We're talking about not just the technical part of people's lives. We're talking about their, other aspects of their lives, like family, their involvement in church. I realize when moms and dads are involved in church, it's just going to be a better game. I'd love for you to address that aspect.
Yeah, that's so important. There's a study that talks about and I think, Pastor, you alluded to this earlier, the 25% of students that stay in church, and that there's 5 reasons why they stay in church. And I think it's so seems simple when you realize it. But these are the 5 things that said, the study that said the 25% of teenagers that stay in church is the 5 reasons why. 1, they had at least one faith-focused adult in their life other than a parent. 2, they were entrusted with responsibility and ministry at an early age. 3, they had spiritual experiences in the home during the week. Outside of church, they had spiritual experiences in the home. 4, they served with their families in a ministry, and 5, they ate dinner 5 out of 7 nights a week as a family. And some of these seem like too simple to make a difference, but these were the key factors, the common denominators of students that remained in church after high school, going into college. And so I think one of the big things parents can do is just to model it. And sometimes it's easy, again, just even having conversations with students. Sometimes as a parent, maybe you feel like it's too late. My kid's 16, 17, about to be 18. It's too late to have spiritual moments, spiritual conversations. But the truth is, they don't stop needing spiritual moments when they leave the house. I mean, I need spiritual moments. We all need these moments. So I had a student share once that, they said that one of their parents wasn't as involved in the spiritual journey just because of busyness and work and different things early on, but later on tried to make an effort. And they were so appreciative that even though they didn't see that when they were younger, that now at this point they started making that effort. And so I guess really the phrase is, it's not too late. It's not too late. You can't change the past, but you can control what happens today. And so I just would encourage, model it. There's a family at our church. Just give some special shout outs to the Rudies, that they are highly involved, high capacity leaders. And this is just one family of many great, awesome families at GPC. But I was told once, and again, I know that they have devotions and different things, but I was told once that they created a board game around, if this is incorrect, please, you guys can correct me, but I was told they created a board game around the tabernacle prayer. Going through is gamified, praying through the tabernacle. Awesome. And their oldest daughter, Dylan Rudy, we have the privilege of being her youth pastor currently, and we'll have Parker and Branson at some point if the Lord tarries, and if we remain in this in this position. But Dylan just a few weeks ago spoke on a Wednesday night, and just seeing the confidence of this young person who has been poured into. We've tried our best to pour into, but just to see the confidence, the anointing, to just step in as a 14-year-old girl, I recognize, man, how important it is what happens in homes. Yeah. And the perfection is not the goal. Perfection isn't the goal. It's making the effort to say this. We want to prioritize this. So one thing, even Amber and I, as a married couple, what we try to do is we try to pray before we go to sleep. And again, I recognize not having kids, but we try to create practices now that we can transfer to that. And if we miss 2 nights, we say, all right, well, we're going to get back on it, because it's easy to get discouraged when you miss those moments, or when you don't pray together, when you don't have spiritual conversations. But I think sometimes we feel the pressure to replicate a Sunday, when it could be as simple as, what has God done for you this week? Or what have you read? What verse have you read this week? Or hey, let's read one verse together as a family. When you do that, kids see, again, students are smart. They're perceptive. They can spot real and they can spot inauthentic. And so when they see that you're making an effort, whether they roll their eyes or whether they seem appreciative now, I'm telling you that one day they'll look back and say, I'm so grateful that my mom and dad put an emphasis on the Word of God. I'm so grateful that even though I didn't want to pray before meals, or I didn't want to pray before we went to sleep, they did that. You don't know the impact that you're making long term.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. There is such a need for spiritual conversations in the home. I remember Tom Rainer, great writer, great church thinker, say this, when he looks back and reflects on his parenting as a father, the one thing that he wished he would have done more is read the Bible with his kids. And man, that really just messed with me. That it doesn't have to be deep, meaningful. It just really has to be intentional. That I'm going to read what like you said, one verse, and let's discuss that. And again, finding places to create that habit, not just hit or miss, but specific times, whether that's the morning, whether that's at night. but really honestly, letting God's word, letting the presence of God and prayer, let those be a part of your daily activity. I've said this before, I'll say it again, but when I take Thatcher to school for years, when it was Trenton and Tanner, there was a street. We called it Prayer Street, right? And whenever we hit that street, that was our signal to pray and just ask God to invade our day. And again, praying specific words over them, like praying, God, don't let them be wise today. Give them wisdom, God. Help them to be the influencer, not the influence. Help them to have wisdom to know right and wrong, good and evil. Let them know what's good people, who's not good people. Praying, God, never let them compare themselves with other students. Let them know they'll always be different, not because they're better, but because they're yours, God, and they're always going to be stand out. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be ashamed of that. Trying to say that over and over and over and over again when they're being tempted. I want them to hear my voice in their head. God, let there be strength. Give them courage. Lord, get boldness. Let them be brave in these moments when they have to stand alone. That's my prayer this morning. You can take them to school. God, if they have to stand alone, God, then give them the courage to stand alone. And it is okay. It's okay. I'm not saying that's the secret sauce. I am saying I want to say that tonight before I go to bed. I will lay my hands on their head again and say, God, I want you to put angels about them as we rest. God, give their body, their spirit, their soul rest as they, God, bring healing, bring strength as they rest. God, give us good dreams. I want them to hear that. And I'm not saying I'm the paragon of this. I just realize every day I don't do spiritual training is a day I give to the enemy. And so I have to take serious my role as a father as stepping into that space. And I'm not perfect. I've done it wrong so many times. But God, again, I am championing what you're saying. It's never too late to start. Go mom and dad. Go someone that would just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to step into this and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. God will take what you do and he knows how to multiply that and bless that. So I think that's incredible advice there. Just as we wrap this up here, what we're talking about matters. It does matter. And we're trying to be helpful here. We're trying to give moms and dads some handrails to really navigate this very important topic. But why does this matter? Should anybody care about what we're talking about today?
Yeah, really two things come to mind. And again, the heart of all of this is we want to help because we want healthy families. We recognize that when families are healthy, the church is healthy, and the local church is the hope of the world. And so two things really that I would take away from this would be one, it just is an encouragement. A quote that I heard for parents says that parents take too much credit when their kids turn out good, but too much blame when they don't. And I think you got to recognize you can't underestimate the God factor in all of this.
Amen.
That God is at work shaping your kids, and maybe you feel like you have kids who have fallen away or gone away. You can't underestimate the fact that God can still restore, that God is empowered to do that. And the other thing that I think is just so crucial, and this is kind of the crux of what we do in student ministry, is that young people don't have to wait to do amazing things for God. Victoria Trevino recently spoke to our students, and she shared that thought that while in school, God just hit her with this, that you don't have to get through this check mark season of life for me to do incredible things in your life. Like God was telling her, she said that I'm not just waiting for the next season, but that in this season right now, there's things that I want to do. And I know we have students who invite other students to church. We have students who are witnessing to other students who are actively working through P7 clubs. And I know we've had students do CMIs and who are working to change the world right now. And I think the most important thing is just understanding that they don't have to wait. That right now kids can do amazing things for God.
Amen. That's so good. And we feel your heart. I feel like I have a behind the scenes look, just because of our relationship and the nature of that. And every person listening, I hope you can hear the heartbeat of our youth pastors, and they are for the young people of our church. You guys believe in this generation. I'm probably your biggest fan besides your mom and your parents.
I disagree.
And Pastor, he's a big fan too, for sure. But
Amen.
I'm probably your biggest. But I'm so thankful for your leadership. You guys are making a difference, and you both bring unique giftings to this. Bill, you're obviously the really nerdy, researched one who's bringing all the stats and all that stuff, which is great. But Amber, you're a tremendous strength as a youth pastor's wife, and I know it may not always be as spotlight or as in the audio files today, but we know you're doing a great work as youth pastors.
Amen.
And we're very thankful for both of you, and thank you for taking time for being on Between Sundays. I believe it's going to help a lot of people, a lot of parents for sure. Hopefully the parents at our church and any other parent that may be listening.
Yeah, what a big thank you. I want to just share and say, and heartfelt, just can't thank you enough for your time, your energy you invest in these kids, your prayers over them, your voice over them, the times you've laid your hands on their heads and sought God for them. Words fail me to tell you how grateful I am for that. It does take a youth pastor and wife that cares. It does take one that love our kids. And when you see the good, the bad, the ugly, and you don't give up on them, thank you for not giving up on them. Amen. Thank you for seeing something in them that's true and good. And we're so thankful that God has given you and Amber, this incredible couple here, to this church to minister. We're so blessed to have your leadership. So thank you. We normally, and we will today, close our time together with a challenge. If we were to issue a challenge after all the content we shared today, what challenge would that be, Brother Bill?
I think it'd simply be, if you feel like you haven't gotten it right as a parent, as a student before, it's not too late. Start now. Start small. Start with a 2-minute prayer at night, one verse, one shoulder-to-shoulder conversation on the way to school. But don't feel like because you missed it before, you've missed it forever. It's not too late. Start now.
Amen. That's a great challenge. And, you guys know, because obviously longtime listeners, first-time participators.
Way to go.
You guys know that we end each episode with our one of our volunteers' favorite verses. And so today we have a pretty amazing guy that we're going to share his favorite verse. Pastor, who do we have?
Yeah, so grateful. Again, we have a lot of great volunteers, and we're so thankful for them. And God bless each and every one of them for what they do. It takes a lot of people to make this church go, and so we're just grateful for you. But this one particular, Brother Landon Gott, he helps with our music. He sings. He helps in our children's ministry. He is now a teacher in our school, and just a great servant heart, great guy. Pretty incredible pickleballer too. I'll throw that in there for what I've beat him more than once though.
True.
But I will tell you, just so grateful for him. But his favorite verse, Jeremiah 29:13, says this: "And ye shall seek me and find me when ye shall seek for me with all your heart." And so, Landon, thank you so very much for your care, your love, your heart for the things of God, the people of God. Thank you for all the things you do to invest in this church. You volunteer, you give, and I can't thank you enough, buddy. Thank you for all you do. God bless you, Brother Landon.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you, and thank you guys for listening to this episode of Between Sundays.